Alright everyone, welcome back to my channel, Baseball Talk with Nick Morgan. So today we're going to be doing a tier list video. I'm ranking every Major League Baseball team's approach to the 2019 trade deadline. And more specifically, I mean, how did they go about the deadline? Did they pick up the targets that they said they wanted, or like the positions that they said they needed? Did what they receive outweigh what they lost? And how is it going to affect their team now? Will it help them win in 2019 or in the future? So with that being said, we're going to get right into the video here, the last video we have of the trade deadline, then back to regular baseball news video for you guys. So let's get into it. Starting off this video, I'm going to be ranking the Diamondbacks, and as you can see on screen, I put them in the B tier. I think they got a nice prospect return and did really well going ahead and getting Mike Leake. They needed him because essentially now that Greinke's gone, he's the replacement. They're not really contenders, though, in 2019, so the Diamondbacks don't have much to worry about. I think they are preparing for the future, and because they got so many nice top prospects in return from guys that they've given away, I put them in the B tier just because I think that their long-term run with this team and the prospects that they got from the deadline is definitely going to be beneficial. Our first A team of the video is the Atlanta Braves. Now, I think they had some really good pickups. They had Shane Green, Mark Melancon, John Ryan Murphy. They addressed all of their problems that they needed fixed. They knew they needed bullpen guys. They went ahead and got some solid arms. You have Green and Melancon, who are now your setup man and your closer. I don't know in what order they're going to use that in. I'd assume Green might be the closer, Melancon's a setup guy, or it could be the other way around. I'm not sure, but I think they did very well. They did what they needed to. They are contenders. They have a spot in the postseason right now, and these bullpen guys are definitely going to help. We just have to kind of wait and see how far they go with the new arms that they acquired in the pen, and John Ryan Murphy's also a really good backup catcher, but I think they do have the chance of going a lot further with Green and Melancon, and with that being said, I put them in the A tier because they did what they needed to. They got some great guys, didn't lose much, and they're contenders looking to go really far in 2019. The Baltimore Orioles really haven't been on top of any list this year, and to kind of keep that going, I put them in the D tier for this video. I think that they lost Cashner, who wasn't really a huge problem for them because it's only one starting pitcher that you're seeing every 5 or 6 days, but they only got 2 prospects in return, and this team is working off of a rebuild. Like, they need to kind of get some young prospects, and that's going to be their future team. Only receiving 2 kind of minor prospects isn't really going to help that, and they lost Andrew Cashner, so if they were going to keep him and not really make any moves, I think they'd be at a C, but they kind of took a step back, losing Cashner and not getting much back in return. Now we have the Boston Red Sox. They are the first team we're going to see in the F tier. They got Andrew Cashner, but nobody else. Their pitching is key, and they don't really have bullpen guys. Starting pitching is pretty decent at this point, but they needed some arms to come into later innings. They did not acquire anybody in that sense, and they're kind of a contending team still at this point. They're third in the AL East. They're looking for a wild card spot, though. Now they are further back after they lost all 4 games to the Yankees the other day, but the Red Sox just really needed some more pickups here. Andrew Cashner, he's a good addition. Good pickup, nice starting pitching guy. But he's not enough. That's not the only move you can make expecting to go super far into the postseason. So for the Chicago Cubs, I was kind of torn. I wasn't sure if I should put them in the B tier or the A tier. I dropped them in B because they did get some big guys. They had a nice deadline, good acquisitions, not much lost, and they're just looking really good at this point in time. They're not one of the better teams in baseball, but I think they definitely could be. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I could have moved Chicago into that A tier, but they're definitely in the high B, low A, somewhere in between. But Castellanos, Tony Kemp, they flipped Martin Maldonado. They did exactly what they needed to. I think it worked out very well for them. They had one of the better deadlines in Major League Baseball. I put them in the B tier for that reason. The Chicago White Sox didn't actually do much at the trade deadline. They did lose Nate Jones, but really other than that, no big moves. They didn't acquire anyone. They didn't really lose a whole lot. I mean, just one player, and he's the pitcher. I think they could have done a lot more at the trade deadline, really sold some more guys to benefit their future. So with that being said, I put them in the C tier just because it's kind of neutral. They're not really helping themselves. They're not really hurting themselves by the time of the deadline. And, they're definitely a younger team. So if they sold some of their big names, maybe they could have gotten someone in return that could help, probably 2021 or 2022 for them because young prospects and good guys with talent. But I think overall, the White Sox didn't do terrible. Definitely not the worst team in the deadline. I put them at C. I dropped the Reds also in the B tier. They really did well getting Trevor Bauer. I thought they were going to flip him, which could have been a crazy trade deadline move, especially since they acquired him one day before the deadline. But other than that, there really weren't any big additions. Bauer, again, huge name, huge pitcher for them. They have a really good, first 2 or 3 guys. That's starting rotation now. Luis Castillo, Trevor Bauer, and I guess Sonny Gray would be in there too. I mean, the Reds aren't really playing for 2019, I don't think, at this point. They're not contenders, but this could definitely help them out in the future. They got rid of some guys that they didn't really see a future with, so in return, they're getting a nice starter. And again, Trevor Bauer's not going to help them win in 2019. He might win some games on his own with the team, but not really bring them to the postseason. With that being said, though, they did a lot more. They gained a lot more than they lost, so you can't put them in the C tier or lower. I put them in B. The Cleveland Indians actually did pretty well. They did lose Trevor Bauer at the deadline, but they received Puig, Franmil Reyes, and Logan Allen. Again, that's kind of at this point going to outweigh the loss of Bauer just because he's pitching one every 5 days, and with these players here, you're using them almost every day, or the majority of them almost every day, if not every day. And they can win without him. They aren't slowing down. They're still looking to go ahead and be contenders. They want to make a spot in the postseason. Of course, it'd be ideal to get the division title, but if they have to suck it up and, play the wild card, I think that'd be fine either way. At least they're making it to the postseason. They adjust all their needs. They fulfilled them. They needed some guys in the outfield. They needed guys for depth just all around on the baseball diamond. So I think they did well. I put them in the A tier. I was very picky when it came to the S tier. You're only going to see one team, and I think you can guess who it is, but we'll be talking about them in just a couple minutes. The Colorado Rockies would go ahead and join the Boston Red Sox in the F tier. They made one swap with the Yankees for pitching arms, but they're both no names, so I don't really know what the Rockies were trying to do with this deadline. Maybe they weren't going to sell. They didn't really confirm buyers or sellers before the deadline or any rumors. They don't really have much to give away. I mean, there were some crazy trade possibilities, like maybe, send Blackman to the Braves or something like that, but that wasn't going to end up happening. They're not really a great team in 2019, and they didn't make any trades to get better. They didn't get worse, I guess, but just at the deadline, you need to see some more moves, especially in the Colorado Rockies. And if you think about it, they have some good pieces to their team. It's not working out for them. I think the Rockies definitely could have been a better squad in 2019, and especially with the help of the trade deadline. With that being said, they're going to be in their respective F tier. So the Detroit Tigers were sellers at this deadline, 100%. Nicholas Castellanos and Shane Green, they both shipped off to different teams. However, they didn't really get much back. They got a couple of top 30 prospects, but for Green and Castellanos, who are both pretty big names, Green having a very good season ERA-wise, Castellanos a really good bat, you would have expected a little bit more, maybe even like a major league piece and then some prospects, but really nothing. So I put them in the D tier because they did lose 2 very good players. They got some top 30 prospects back. I get this is a team that has to rebuild, and they got some pieces to rebuild, but I just don't think that was the right approach. They definitely could have asked for a lot more, especially for Shane Green. I think they undersold him a little bit, but you know what? I'm not the Tigers. I'm not in the front office for them, but because of their actions at the deadline, I had to put them in the D tier. I think you already know where this next team is going, and not to really spoil anything here, but they're going to be the only team in this tier for the entire video. The Houston Astros are in the S tier. What they did at the deadline was amazing. Zach Greinke, Joe Biagini, Aaron Sanchez, Martin Maldonado. They got some big names. They really needed pitching. They addressed that 100%. Went out and got one of the best pitchers in the league. And now to think that Verlander, Cole, and Greinke are all in the same rotation is kind of crazy. They're already the second best team in baseball behind the Los Angeles Dodgers record-wise. Now they could potentially be the first and maybe win the World Series in 2019. I'm super excited to see what this team is doing. I love what they did with the franchise. I think they made all the right moves. And the Yankees, have a lot of competition now against them. This is perfect. I put them in the S tier. I think they 100% deserve it. So the Kansas City Royals didn't do terrible at this deadline. They did receive Mike Montgomery from the Cubs, and their best minor leaguer that they got at the time the deadline was Kevin Merrill. They didn't make a whole lot of moves, but overall what they did wasn't terrible. They are in the C tier. I think that they are kind of going to be right about where they were before they made some big moves. I mean, they lost Summer Bailey and a couple other semi-big names before July 31st. So it's definitely not the best move. They could have made a lot more pieces and transaction changes and stuff, but I think for the most part the Royals did pretty well. They're not really going to benefit. They're not really going to lose a whole lot from the deadline, and they're not really contenders in 2019. They're not winning a whole lot in this season, so they don't really have much to worry about. They're playing for the future, and I think that's what they did. So I was really considering putting the Los Angeles Angels in the D tier, but I was going a little easy. I put them in the C tier. The only big move that they made was acquiring Max Stassi, who's a backup catcher. I mean, They're not going to be better or worse with him, really. I don't think this is going to be a big problem or improvement for the team, and they have had their ups and downs this season, so they're not going to win much in 2019 other than like a couple games and maybe some series, but they're not making it to the postseason. Max Stassi's not a big name. I mean, I only know him because of MLB The Show personally, and I'm going to be completely honest, but I don't think it's bad. Again, it's just kind of a neutral deadline for the Angels. Didn't really gain much or lose much. The best team in baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers. I put them in the C tier right behind the Los Angeles Angels. They really only acquired Jed Jerko and Tyler White, and Jerko's not having a good season. Tyler White's pretty okay most of the time. They're not huge guys, but to be fair, they already had a very good team. They didn't need a whole lot of improvements, so I guess I could have put them higher just because they didn't really need anyone at the time of the deadline, but I think they could have made some moves here and there, maybe like an extra bullpen guy or just someone. However, I don't disagree with what they did. They are the best team in baseball. They are the NL favorites for the postseason and the World Series. So you got to give them some credit. I did it on the C tier. I couldn't go any harder on them because they already have a great team to begin with. The Miami Marlins are actually going to go ahead and make their way into one of the better teams in the B tier. They got a lot of good prospects in return for some very little guys for that team. I mean, they did lose Sergio Romo and a couple other pieces, but they're not a team that's winning in 2019. We know that. We all know that they're looking for the future, and they got some good prospects. I think they're going to do well, and they have some young talent that they just received that they will definitely take advantage of and use to their best of the abilities in their future. I like what they did. They didn't really get rid of everyone. They still have Brian Anderson, Garrett Cooper, and a couple other names or big names from the Marlins team. And, they have some good young guys for the future. I like it. I put them in the B tier. I think they did well. Not A or S tier worthy, but they did good for a team that's really not going anywhere this season. So the Brewers have a tendency of doing pretty much nothing at the trade deadline in the past couple of seasons, and I can't say they did much different this year. They did go ahead and acquire Drew Pomeranz and Jacob Faria and Lyles, but they're not great players, and they needed to address starting pitching and more bullpen arms. They did get some guys here and there, but as a team that's in the postseason race, but not really at this point in time, they need to win a lot more games. They needed some bigger names on their side, on their receiving end, than what they received and what they had by the time the deadline was over. I mean, Pomeranz is kind of shaky. Jacob Faria is having a pretty decent year, I guess, and Jordan Lyles pretty much the same as Faria. I think they definitely could have done a lot better. It's a good team, but they needed starting pitching guys and rotation guys, and they didn't do that. They're not terrible. They didn't lose a whole lot, and they received some decent players, so I couldn't put them really lower than C, but they do find themselves closer to the end of the C tier. The Minnesota Twins are already first in the AL Central by the time July 31st came around. I put them in the B tier just because they could have acquired a couple more pieces. They did get Sergio Romo, though, which is kind of big for them because they needed some bullpen help. They addressed that and received him in a trade with the Marlins. But really, other than that, not a whole lot of moves. If they really wanted to guarantee themselves first in the AL Central, they could have acquired some more guys. The Indians are on their tail, and they had a very good deadline, as we already talked about here. So I don't know who's going to end up in first. It could be back and forth between the Indians and the Twins. I think August and the rest of August is going to be really interesting, especially to watch in that division. But again, they picked up some good pieces, didn't lose much, so I had to put them in the B tier because I think overall they didn't do terrible. Let's talk about the New York Mets. I mean, they've been on fire these past couple of days following the end of the deadline, and in this video they can find themselves also in the B tier with a couple other teams. The big acquisition here was Marcus Stroman. They received him from the Toronto Blue Jays. They actually didn't really lose much. Two prospects, pretty decent prospects, Kay and Woods Richardson, but I think for the most part they did well. They have a very nice rotation at this point in time. They lost Vargas, but now Stroman is essentially the upgraded version of Vargas in that rotation. They didn't lose anyone else, so now they have DeGrom, Syndergaard, Stroman, Matz, and Wheeler, which is really good. Probably not in that order per se, but 5 solid starting pitchers. They really want to go ahead and get this wildcard spot. I think if they do, it would be one of the biggest surprises that we see in the end of August, or the couple of weeks of August that we have left. I think they could definitely do it. And for the Mets at the deadline, it was kind of like quality over quantity. They didn't make a whole lot of moves. Really only Stroman and Jason Vargas. And, even with that, I do find themselves in the B tier because Stroman's very good. Vargas, pretty decent. They didn't really get a good prospect back from him, like a very decent catching prospect, but he's better defensively than offensively. I like what the Mets did. I think it's going to help them now. I was kind of confused going into whether they were buyers or sellers, if they're playing for now or the future, but at this point in time, it looks like they're kind of playing for both. The New York Yankees. Well, I don't have much to talk about here. I could have, and I was actually contemplating making an entire rant video on how bad the Yankees did at the deadline. They said they needed starting pitching. They hyped up all their fans. Like, yeah, we're going to go after all these big guys. Trevor Bauer, Madwell, Matt Boyd, all of them. One of them is probably going to be on the Yankees by the end of the deadline. That was not the case. They did absolutely nothing. I mentioned it when I talked about the Rockies. They made one pitching swap with Colorado, but both were no names, and that's not going to help either team. The Yankees did so bad. They're in the F tier. The worst team, the worst deadline. Not the worst team, but the worst team's approach and deadline activity. New York Yankees, 100%. They did terrible, and I don't know. I just think if they really want to stay favorites in the American League for the World Series and the postseason, they needed to A, prevent Houston Astros getting pitching, and B, acquire as much pitching as possible. They did none of that. Even if they couldn't get a starter, at least get some bullpen guys or something, because you just, rotation's been rough in 2019 for them, and I get that. It's been back and forth, but they needed a lot more help. They acquired Terrence Gore, but that's really it. I think he was caught stealing in his first ever appearance in minor league baseball with the Yankees, which is great because the only reason why they got him was to use him on the bases, and he was out, and that's it. I can't go any further into this. I'm getting upset. Yankees, F tier, they did terrible. The Oakland Athletics are actually going to find themselves in the B tier for this video. They went ahead and got some good starting pitching. Not big names, but Homer Bailey, pretty decent. And Tanner Roark from the Reds, so that's a good trade right there. They like to get those little guys and make them into big superstar players, and I think they can do that with some of the guys they just received at the time of the deadline. And I like what they did. They are in the postseason talks at this point in time. They could get a wild card spot and go pretty far. We just have to kind of wait and see what they do as well. At baseball at this point, it's a waiting game. As we're in August, we want to see how the Athletics will react to the Astros being even better now and first in the division and all the other teams they face. I'm excited to see this rotation from the Athletics in full effect. I think it's very good. That being said, I got to put on the B tier. They won a lot more than they lost with this deadline. I put the Phillies in the high C, low B tier. Essentially, that's what it is. They're at the very top of the C list here. I think they did acquire some pretty decent guys in Corey Dickerson and Jason Vargas, but they didn't really lose much, which is good. They are contenders, but they really needed a little bit more because currently they are not first in their division. They are kind of going back and forth with the Nationals for the second wildcard spot, so if they want to see themselves in later months of baseball, they really needed to go ahead and get some bigger names, some bigger starting pitching guys, or at least try. Jason Vargas isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but he's Jason Vargas, and that's your only guy that you went after as a starting pitcher. If you say that that's the biggest trade deadline move that you made, that's got to throw you off right there because that's not really a huge move. I think a lot more could have been done with this Phillies team. Not complaining, but they're going to find themselves high C, low B tier. So the Pirates pretty much acquired no-name guys. I mean, Cody Ponce and a player to be named later, but really, other than that, that's it. I find them in the D tier, and I put them in the D tier just because it doesn't seem like they're working really for now or the future as they acquire no good prospects and no good current Major League Baseball players, or even decent in Major League Baseball players. I think maybe holding on to Felipe Vasquez was the wrong move here on the Pittsburgh Pirates' behalf, but I could be wrong. If they sold him, I think they could have gotten a lot more and found themselves a lot higher on this list, but because they didn't do that, I find them in the D tier. I think that just makes sense. They didn't do much at this deadline. So coming into this trade deadline, I thought that the San Diego Padres were going to go ahead and target starting pitching. However, the only decent name they received by July 31st this year was Carl Edwards Jr., who's actually a bullpen guy coming from the Cubs. Not a big name. That's really their only move that they made. I put them in the high D tier because they're back and forth from C to D. I mean, they could be good. They might not be after this move. Edwards Jr. has definitely had his good seasons, but 2019 has not been his year. He's not going to be a closer. He's not probably even going to be the setup man. He might be a long reliever or something like that, somewhere along those terms. But I just think that the Padres could have done a lot more. I don't know who they would have gone after necessarily, but just, Carl Edwards Jr., not a big name. Nothing really pops out at me and says, oh, that was good. So the San Francisco Giants are in the B tier. I was going back and forth from A and B, but I think this is where they belong. High up in the B tier, though. Don't get me wrong. I think they did the right things at this deadline. They added Scooter Gennett, who's definitely going to be of some help, at least to them. They dumped a bunch of guys that were back and forth on buyers and sellers before July 31st, but they received Maurice Dubon. I think that's huge. He'll definitely help them out in the future. That's a very good prospect to have in the organization. I think he could definitely be the next Fernando Tatis Jr. and Vlad Jr. when it comes to rookies. Also, Pete Alonso, I can't forget him. And they kept Madison Bumgarner, which I think is good because it's better than them getting rid of him and not getting enough back. So they made the right decisions. Mad Bum was kind of a big name. A lot of teams could have targeted him, and I think we're targeting him. He didn't get moved. I think it's good. I think what the Giants did was definitely on the right track, and maybe they play for the postseason and they actually get in. I don't know what's going to happen. Only time will tell. I put the Mariners in the C tier because much like a couple other teams this year, it's a pretty neutral, pretty balanced deadline. They got primarily a prospect return, and they didn't really lose a whole lot. Mike Leake is now with the Diamondbacks, as we talked about that already. But I didn't expect a lot from this team. They started off very hot, and they have slowly, and actually very quickly, found themselves in 5th in the division. They're not going anywhere. They just kind of had to get rid of some guys they didn't see a future with. And Mike Leake, there was a need for. The Diamondbacks offered a decent amount, and they accepted it. I got to put them in the C tier just because, again, they were neutral, didn't do much. What they received is not going to help them or harm them in 2019. The Cardinals are in the F tier. They really did nothing this deadline. Didn't pick anyone up, didn't lose anyone. Jed Jerko, maybe you consider that a big name, but after the season he's having, I don't really think you can do that at this point in time. Not to say anything bad against him, but they're a team that's pretty decent this year in 2019, and I don't exactly remember off the top of my head where they are right now in the standings and their wild card race potential, but I think they definitely could have benefited from a little bit of moves and some transaction changes here because, you can always benefit. You can always go up instead of down, but I want to say they were neutral. I think I was expecting a lot more from them, so I had to put them in the F tier. I could have put them in the C, but I think just expecting a lot more from them, and they already have a good team. They made a lot of moves before 2019. I kind of was expecting that to kind of transfer over here. They acquired Miller and Goldschmidt. I was hoping for something big. I put the Rays in the A tier. They received Eric Sogard, who's having the best season of his career at the age of 33 right now. Jesus Aguilar is a good right-handed bat that they were in dire need of, and they went ahead, addressed those two needs, and got them. Sogard has a lot of depth and versatility, which is huge. They also added some pitching arms, which they needed because injuries have definitely attacked starting pitching and bullpen guys for them all year long. They're not a first-place team, but definitely a wild card team. It's kind of hard to follow up with the Yankees this year, even though the deadline was garbage. I'm not going to talk about that again, though. But yeah, like what the Rays did, I think they acquired some pretty big names in Jesus Aguilar and some of the pitchers that they got. Eric Sogard's good as well. A lot of depth, a lot of versatility added, which is very good for them because I want to see them make a pretty long postseason push. I don't want to see them win against the Yankees at all, but I do think that they're a good team. And with the guys that they have out with injury, I think they're doing very well adjusting to that. I think they did good at the deadline, so I put them in the A tier. The Rangers are another team here that didn't do much but didn't acquire or lose any big names that are going to harm them in any way. I think definitely dealing minor would have been smart because they would have gotten some nice prospects back. Maybe a Clint Frazier too if they sent him to the Yankees. But for the most part, they received okay pitching. I think they did decent at the deadline. They definitely could have acquired some bigger names, some better names. But you know what? We all know that they're not playing for 2019. They are playing for the future, and they got some prospects back, I do believe. So I guess that's good there. I got to keep them in the C tier for this one. The Blue Jays did their job at the deadline. They sold everyone that they wanted to, some big names. I thought they would have moved Giles, which I was actually kind of surprised they didn't. But they got rid of Stroman, Aaron Sanchez, Joe Biagini, and a couple other big names. However, they didn't get a lot back for them. I was a little upset on how much they kind of were just willing to go ahead and give these guys away, essentially. They didn't get prospects back or any big name prospects that would have really helped them out. We know they have a really good farm system. They're working the team off the farm system, especially this year. They've had 3 call-ups of 3 great players, all had fathers who played baseball and are in the Hall of Fame. So they have a good farm system. They're definitely playing for the future, and the young talent is what they're looking after right now. They dealt big names, didn't get a lot back. I think Giles definitely would have helped them. I put them in the D tier just because if they would have gotten some good prospects back, they would have found themselves in the C tier or maybe even B tier. But because they didn't have a good return, I got to put them a little lower than that. Our final team of the video is the Washington Nationals. Now, the Nationals are going to be the last team to place in the A tier and the last team we talk about, of course. But I think they did well. They added 3 strong relievers, which is exactly what they needed. They're battling the Phillies and a couple other teams for that second wildcard spot. But the fight with the Phillies right now is huge. They're going back and forth, teeter-tottering. Not only is it for second in the division, which actually isn't much of anything. It doesn't mean a whole lot, but that second wildcard spot is huge. And the Nationals going ahead and adding who they did is a big, big move. They're out here ready to fight. They want some blood, and they want to win now and in 2019. I think you really have to look at them and say they had one of the better trade deadlines out of the majority of teams in Major League Baseball this year. Definitely top 5 for sure. I think Astros, Braves, Indians, Rays, Nationals, somewhat maybe in that order, maybe not, but Nationals did well. I like what they did. They got some good pitching, and that's what they needed. A lot of teams did that, but kind of didn't this year. They had targets, but never really fulfilled them. The Nationals did that, and I like that. So guys, that's going to end it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a like down below, comment, and subscribe. We are done with all of our trade deadline content. So if you think you missed any one of the videos, we did post a decent amount, you can go ahead and use the link down below in the description box. It's going to take you to a playlist of all of my trade deadline uploads for 2019. With that being said, we are also on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already subscribed, I ask that you please do so. It would mean a whole lot to me, and I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace.